Ciao, and welcome to Immersion Travel Italy. I'm Katerina Ferrara, travel author, travel blogger, and your host. This podcast is about experiencing Italy beyond the checklist, slowing down and understanding places not just for what we see, but for why they matter. In today's episode, you're traveling with me to Bologna, a city that often surprises people because it doesn't try to impress. Bologna works quietly, it studies deeply, and it holds on to its traditions without turning them into performance. Known as La Dotta, the learned, La Grassa, the fat, and La Rossa, the red, Bologna earned its nicknames over centuries. Learned because it built the oldest university in the Western world and spent 1,000 years teaching Europe how to think. Fat because its food traditions are so legendary that even Italians acknowledge Bologna as the country's culinary authority, and red for the terracotta buildings that warm the streets, and for the city's long history of political radicalism. These aren't tourist board inventions, they're how Bologna actually operates, intellectual, indulgent, and unapologetically itself. In this episode, we'll walk through Bologna's porticoed streets and piazzas, climb medieval towers, step inside churches where faith and science coexist, uncover hidden canals flowing beneath the city, and spend time in markets where food is treated as an identity, not a trend. We'll also look beyond the city with easy day trips in Emilia Romagna, including Modena, Parma, Imola, and even Ravenna. This is Bologna, a thinking city. Let's begin. When my family spent time here, what struck us wasn't grandeur or beauty, but how functional everything felt. There are lots of university students. It has a very young vibe. The university isn't a historic relic. It's got 80,000 people attending classes. The food isn't boutique cuisine. It's what people cook at home and how they expect to eat well. Bologna doesn't curate itself for visitors. It has better things to do. Bologna has deep historical roots, and it has been continuously inhabited for over 3,000 years. The Etruscans founded Felsina around 1000 BC, building it into a major northern city. When Rome conquered the Po Valley in 189 BC, they razed the Etruscan settlement and rebuilt it as Bologna, a Roman colony planted directly on the Via Emilia, an narrow straight road that runs through the city center today. The road wasn't just infrastructure, it was power. The Via Emilia connected Rome to the northern frontier, moving legions, trade goods, and imperial authority along its way. Bologna's position on this route made it a wealthy and strategically crucial city. What's remarkable is that Bologna never stopped. Most Italian cities have their layers, Roman ruins buried under medieval streets, buried under Renaissance squares. But Bologna kept using the same grid. Via Emilia became the main commercial street, and it remains so today. The Roman street plan shaped every medieval expansion that followed. By 1088, when the university was founded, Bologna was already an ancient city with tradition of self-governance. It operated as a comune, an independent city-state that answered to no king. Bologna's Renaissance reached its height under the Bentivoglio family, who ruled the city like princes from 1440 to 1506. They commissioned art, built palaces, and ran Bologna as their personal domain, wealthy, independent, and unapologetic about their power. Then Pope Julius II crushed them. 1506, papal armies seized Bologna, ending centuries of self-rule. The Bentivoglio fled. Their family palace was demolished stone by stone, and Bologna became part of the Papal States and would remain there for 300 years. But here's what didn't change. The university kept teaching, the artists kept working, the anatomists kept dissecting. Bologna lost political independence but retained its intellectual authority. Popes controlled the government, but they didn't control the city. Let's talk about the university that shaped Europe, as it is a key aspect of Bologna's identity. In 1088, the University of Bologna emerged, the oldest university in the world. It wasn't founded by a pope or a king. It grew organically from groups of law students who came to Bologna to study Roman law under masters. These students organized themselves into guilds called universitas, based on where they were from. There were the Lombards, the Tuscans, the Romans. They hired their own professors, they set their own curriculum, and they ran the institution themselves. The students had the power, not the church or the nobility. This model was radical. It meant that education answered to the people paying for it and using it, not to an outside authority. Other universities across Europe copied Bologna's structure. The university reshaped the city's economy and identity. Boarding houses multiplied. Copyists set up shops. Taverns filled with debate. Bologna's wealth came not from feudal land or trade monopolies, but from knowledge. Students paid tuition, they bought books, they rented rooms. By the 14th century, Bologna had 10,000 students in a city of 50,000 people. The entire urban fabric bent around them. Bologna's commitment to intellectual merit over social convention went further than most places. Women taught here centuries before other European universities allowed it. Letizia Gozzadini reportedly taught law in the 13th century. Novella D'Andrea lectured in the 14th. In 1732, Laura Bassi became the first woman in Europe to earn a university degree and hold a professorship, teaching physics while conducting groundbreaking research in Newtonian mechanics and electricity. If knowledge mattered more than tradition, then talent mattered more than gender. Today you still see it. The density of bookstores, the student energy on the streets, the assumption that ideas are worth arguing about in public. Bologna built itself around learning and never stopped. I also want to talk porticos before we get into our tour. The portico is what makes walking through Bologna different than any other Italian city. Bologna has 62 kilometers, or 38 miles, of covered walkways threading through the city, more porticoed streets than anywhere else on Earth. They began in the Middle Ages when universities swelled with students and Bologna ran out of space. Property owners built outward over the sidewalks, creating rooms that jutted into the street. The city forced them to add columns underneath to keep everything safe, and what started as an improvised expansion became the city's defining feature. We saw original wooden structures of the medieval porticos on Casa Isolani, on the Strada Maggiore, and along Via Marsala. These timbered beams are dark with age. The supports are worn smooth from centuries of hands brushing past. These are some of the surviving examples. Most of the wooden porticos were actually rebuilt in brick or stone as the city modernized. No two porticos are identical. Some have low brick arches barely tall enough to clear your head. Others soar with Renaissance elegance. When you walk through medieval wood structures, Renaissance stone structures, and Baroque structures all in the same block. And it's also interesting because many of the porticos have intricate tile flooring. These aren't museum pieces, they're infrastructure. In the summer, they keep the city 10 degrees cooler, and in the winter, you can cross Bologna in a rainstorm without getting wet. Market vendors set up under them, students gather, and men argue politics in the shade. The longest portico in the world climbs to the hill of Santa Luca. It has 666 arches, nearly 4 kilometers built, so the faithful could process to the sanctuary without exposure to weather or immodesty. UNESCO designated these porticos a World Heritage Site in 2021, but they've been shaping daily life for 8 centuries. Before we begin our tour, I want to mention our daily ritual, which was breakfast at the Caffè Pasticceria Gambarini. Every morning, we crossed the street from our Airbnb and visited this delightful cafe. It's on Via Ugo Bassi. It's elegant, but not formal. It's busy and efficient. The kind of place where locals stop on their way to work, order without looking at the menu, and leave within minutes. They know what they want because they have been coming here for years. We started going here because it was close by, but we kept going because the pastries are exceptional and the coffee was delicious. Pastries are not overly sweet. It's perfectly balanced. They had croissants that were actual layers. They had this sfogliatelle, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And I always enjoyed my cappuccino. Standing at the counter each morning became part of our routine. We'd watch the staff work, quick, precise, no wasted motion. We'd see the same faces because people stop here every day on their way to work or headed out shopping. I highly recommend finding Gambarini when you're in town. I believe there's also a location near the train. We'll talk about the train station in a bit, but if you're coming in by train, you could certainly grab a snack there. Let's continue our virtual tour with the main piazza, which is Piazza Maggiore. The center of Bologna is Piazza Maggiore. It's one of Italy's most authentic and intellectually alive public squares. Unlike the grand ceremonial piazzas that we talked about in the Turin episode, Piazza Maggiore feels human. It has always been a civic space rather than a royal one. People gather here naturally. Children play on the paving stones. Students read, debate, protest, sprawl across the steps. The square took shape in the 13th century when Bologna was asserting itself as a powerful, self-governing comune. Rather than building a single dominating palace, the city surrounded this piazza with institutions of civic life. The Palazzo Comunale, or the Comune, this city hall, the Palazzo del Podestà, and later the Palazzo di Accursio. Power here was shared, debated, and negotiated. Piazza Maggiore became a physical expression of Bologna's political philosophy, grounded in law, education, and public participation. This square was never meant for kings. It was designed for the citizens. And it's anchored by the immense Basilica of San Petronio, whose scale immediately commands attention. Construction began in 1390, funded not by the church, but by the people of Bologna. This detail matters. San Petronio was conceived as a civic church dedicated to the city's patron. The ambition was extraordinary. Plans for the basilica that would surpass even St. Peter's in size. For Bologna, this was a bold statement of independence, pride, and confidence. The ambition, however, brought consequences. As papal power tightened its grip on Bologna in the 16th century, Rome intervened. Funding was curtailed, the design was altered, and construction was slowly and ultimately stopped. The unfinished brick facade you see today is not the result of neglect, but of politics. It stands as a quiet reminder of a moment when Bologna's aspirations collided with papal authority. And yet, the incomplete feels San Petronio did not end up being bigger than St. Peter's, as you probably know. Let's talk about Julius II and Michelangelo, and a statue that did not survive. Piazza Maggiore was also the stage for one of the most dramatic artistic episodes of the Renaissance. In 1506, Pope Julius, the formidable and famously temperamental pope, entered Bologna in triumph after bringing the city firmly under papal control. To assert his authority, Julius commissioned a monumental bronze statue of himself to be placed above the main portal of San Petronio. The artist chosen was none other than Michelangelo. Michelangelo worked on this statue for nearly 2 years, casting it carefully in bronze, portraying Julius II as a commanding, almost imperial figure. Installed in 1508, the statue loomed over Piazza Maggiore, a clear symbol of papal dominance over the city that had long prized its autonomy. But the people of Bologna never embraced it. Just 3 years later, in 1511, when the papal forces were driven out of the city during political upheaval, the statue was torn down by an angry crowd. The bronze was melted and repurposed into a cannon, symbolically transforming papal authority into an instrument of defense. Today, that cannon survives under the name La Giulia. While Michelangelo's statue exists only in drawings and descriptions, Michelangelo was crushed by this fact. Few cities can claim to have lost a Michelangelo monument so dramatically. The absence itself has become part of Bologna's story. Inside the basilica, I want to mention the Bolognini Chapel. It holds one of the most striking Last Judgment frescoes in Italy, painted in the early 15th century by Giovanni da Modena. The depiction of hell is unforgettable. A chaotic, multi-tiered vision of damnation with demons, sinners, and punishments rendered in vivid, almost overwhelming detail. In one particularly provocative panel, the Prophet Muhammad appears among the damned, a depiction so controversial it required armed protection even in recent decades. Whether the fresco was influenced by Dante's Inferno is debated, but the connection is unmistakable. Both works share a visceral, structured imagination of eternal punishment. Standing before it, you will feel the medieval mind grappling with mortality, justice, and consequence through imagery designed to terrify and instruct. Inside San Petronio, Bologna's intellectual character reveals itself in a quieter but equally powerful way. Running across the floor of the basilica is one of the world's longest meridian lines, installed in the 17th century by astronomer Giovanni Domenico Cassini. A small opening high in the church allows sunlight to enter at noon, marking the precise position of the sun throughout the year. The meridian line was used to study solar movement, calculate the calendar, and refine astronomical knowledge. That such an instrument exists inside a church speaks volumes about Bologna. Here, faith and reason were not seen as opposing forces. They are partners in understanding the world. Just beyond Piazza Maggiore rise Bologna's most iconic and unmistakable landmarks, the Due Torri, the Asinelli Tower, and the Garisenda Tower. Today they feel symbolic, almost poetic. In the 12th century, they were anything but. During Bologna's medieval height, the city was dense with towers. At one point, more than 100 rose above the rooftops, built by powerful families eager to assert dominance, wealth, and political influence. These towers were part of fortresses, part status symbol and part warning. Height equaled power. The taller the tower, the greater your family's reach, visibility, and prestige. The vertical competition turned Bologna into a forest of stone. The Asinelli Tower, rising nearly 100 meters, was built by the Asinelli family and remains the tallest surviving medieval tower in Italy. Its height was a declaration of ambition and confidence, visible from miles away and impossible to ignore. Beside it stands the Garisenda Tower, shorter and dramatically leaning. Originally much taller, the tower began to sink due to unstable ground and structural stress. By the 14th century, it was deemed unsafe and partially dismantled, leaving it with the pronounced tilt that we see today. What might have been an embarrassment to town instead became a defining feature. The leaning Garisenda so captured the medieval imagination that Dante Alighieri referenced it in the Divine Comedy, using its precarious angle as a metaphor for instability and impending collapse. Few buildings can claim a place in one of the foundational texts of Western literature. Over time, most of Bologna's towers were dismantled. Some collapsed, others were intentionally reduced as civic authorities sought to curb private power and restore balance to the city. The skyline was tamed but not erased. The survival of these towers feels intentional in hindsight. Together, they tell the story of Bologna's medieval struggle between ambition and order, rivalry and regulation, private power and civic control. We did climb the Asinelli Tower on our second morning in Bologna, figuring we'd get it done before the heat set in. We were prepared. I had done the step mill at the gym. The entrance was unassuming, a doorway at the tower's base, a ticket window, and a warning sign about the physical demands of the climb. Nearly 500 narrow wooden steps spiral through a confined medieval interior, no elevator, a rest stop in the middle, just head up. The first 100 steps are manageable. The family was excited. And then around 400, we had legs that were burning. It's not a casual climb. It is worth it, though, when you make it to the top. The view from the tower is fantastic. Bologna unfolds below in warm red tones, terracotta rooftops stretching outward in every direction. From up here, the portico suddenly makes sense, a single unified system, threads connecting the entire city. We could see the cathedral, Santa Luca on the hill in the distance, and Via Indipendenza cutting through the medieval grid. Beyond the city, gentle hills rise like a natural amphitheater, framing Bologna exactly as it has been framed for 1,000 years. The wind was strong, the platform felt small, but it was absolutely worth the effort. Next stop is Bologna's cathedral. We talked about the Basilica of San Petronio, but that is not Bologna's official cathedral. Instead, it's the Duomo di San Pietro, the Cathedral of St. Peter. It's surprisingly understated for a city of such importance. It's tucked away a short walk from Piazza Maggiore. It doesn't dominate the skyline the way San Petronio does. San Pietro was originally built in the 10th century and rebuilt several times after fires and earthquakes. The cathedral you see today reflects its layered history, with Baroque interiors shaped by Counter-Reformation ideals. Inside, the space feels formal and controlled, designed for liturgy and continuity rather than spectacle. One of the cathedral's most striking features is its bell tower, which houses what was once the largest bell in Bologna, known as La Nona. The sound of these bells once regulated daily life across the city, marking time, prayer, and civic rhythm. A visit here helps clarify something essential about Bologna. Religious power has been ever present, but it didn't necessarily dominate. Next, let's make a lunch stop at a highly acclaimed spot in Bologna, the Trattoria Anna Maria. When the Bolognese talk about tortellini and brodo, they mention Trattoria Anna Maria. It's a family-run trattoria near Via Belle Arte, small and unpretentious. The dining room fills quickly at lunch, mostly locals who've come for decades and visitors who've done their research. The tortellini here are made by hand every morning, and you can see the difference immediately. Each one is small, precise, folded tight, and we were served a giant portion when we visited, more than I could finish. This is a version that Bolognese grandmothers recognize. It's especially busy around the holidays and Sundays when tortellini and brodo is what families expect on the table. The service is efficient without being rushed. You order, your food arrives, and it's exactly as it should be. Our next stop will be the Basilica of San Domenico, learning, law, and quiet authority. If San Petronio represents ambition, the Basilica of San Domenico represents discipline. Founded in the early 13th century, this basilica is one of the most important Dominican sites in the world and houses the tomb of St. Dominic, the founder of the Dominican order. The Dominicans were deeply tied to scholarship, preaching, and the defense of doctrine, which made Bologna, with its university and legal tradition, a natural home. Inside the basilica, you'll encounter one of Bologna's most extraordinary artistic collaborations. The tomb of St. Dominic was worked on by several major artists over the centuries, including Niccolò dell'Arca and Michelangelo, who contributed early sculptures while very young. Walking through San Domenico, you sense Bologna's intellectual backbone, where faith and study are inseparable. The next stop is the Franciscans, the Basilica of San Francesco. In striking contrast, the Basilica of San Francesco, one of Italy's earliest and most important Franciscan churches. Built in the 13th century, shortly after the death of St. Francis of Assisi, this basilica reflects the ideals of the Franciscan order: humility, poverty, and engagement with everyday people. Its Gothic structure is sober and spacious, with emphasis on preaching rather than ornament. Behind the main altar lies one of Bologna's most quietly powerful features: the medieval tombs of the glossators, the early legal scholars who shaped European law. These stone sarcophagi honor men whose interpretations of Roman law influenced legal systems across the continent. The detail is profoundly Bolognese. Even here, in a Franciscan church that is dedicated to humility, the city honors learning. If I mention the Dominicans and the Franciscans, I have to also mention the Augustinians. Their church was San Giacomo Maggiore, and the Augustinian church belonged to Bologna's most powerful family, the Bentivoglio, who ruled the city like princes before the Pope arrived in 1506. Their family chapels are political statements in marble and paint. Frescoes by Lorenzo Costa show the Bentivoglio clan in their glory, richly dressed, surrounded by symbols of power. This is what Bologna looked like when it governed itself: wealthy, independent, and unafraid to display ambition. After papal control tightened, this kind of secular grandeur became impossible. Bologna's religious orders weren't just about faith. They were centers of intellectual power, and they competed fiercely with each other. The Franciscans, Dominicans, and Augustinians established major monasteries here, precisely because of the university. These orders needed educated priests and theologians, and Bologna was where Europe's best minds gathered to study law, philosophy, and theology. But they weren't collaborating, they were rivals. Each order built grand churches, accumulated large libraries, and attracted more prominent scholars. They also fought for influence over the university's theology and its curriculum. The Dominicans in particular built one of the most important houses in Bologna. San Domenico became a hub for theological debate and manuscript production. When you see these churches and former convents throughout Bologna, you're looking at what once paralleled universities, competing for students, prestige, and intellectual authority. They weren't separate from Bologna's identity. They were essential to it. The next item on our tour that I want to mention are the incredible hidden canals. Most people do not associate Bologna with canals, and that's exactly what makes them so fascinating. Beneath the porticos, behind the shuttered buildings, and under the streets filled with students and cafes, water still moves quietly through the city. Bologna's canals are not a romantic afterthought. They are the remains of a sophisticated medieval system that once powered one of the most advanced industrial cities in Europe. Long before factories and railways, Bologna ran on water. Beginning in the Middle Ages, Bologna developed an intricate network of artificial canals designed to divert water from nearby rivers, primarily the Reno and Savannah. These canals powered grain mills, silk workshops, tanneries, and textile production, turning Bologna into a thriving economic center. Water wheels once turned continuously throughout the city, providing energy for industry centuries before the Industrial Revolution. In fact, Bologna's silk industry was so advanced, its hydraulic technology was studied and admired across Europe. This system allowed Bologna to grow wealthy without relying on a major river running through its center. It was a rare advantage at the time. The canals weren't decorative, they were functional, controlled, and regulated, much like the city itself. As the city modernized in the 19th and 20th centuries, many canals were gradually covered over. Streets were expanded, buildings grew denser. The water was hidden but not eliminated. Today, the canals still flow beneath Bologna, largely invisible unless you know where to look. There's a few places where you can still see these canals. One of the most famous is a small window on Via Piella, where a narrow window in the wall offers a surprising view of a canal lined with colorful buildings. The sight often stops people mid-step. It feels unexpected. You can also trace the route of the canals near Via delle Moline, in an area named for the mills that once lined the waterways. Even when the water itself is hidden, the name preserves its memory. I want to mention next a seat of the University of Bologna called the Arci Ginnasio. This is the oldest part of the university. The walls are covered with coats of arms belonging to students and professors from across Europe. And there is an anatomical theater. At the center of one of Europe's most remarkable spaces, a 17th century wooden amphitheater built for public human dissections. While much of Europe treated the body with fear or superstition, Bologna approached it with preciseness and openness. Carved wooden figures of famous physicians looked down on the marble dissection table, where students watched and earned knowledge through observation. This is where Bologna's intellectual authority becomes tangible. Obviously, it's not used for dissections anymore. The next spot I want to mention is the National Gallery, the Pinoteca Nazionale. Bologna's art collection reveals a city that developed its own powerful vision, one rooted in balance, realism, and emotional restraint. Here you'll find Guido Reni's refined figures and the revolutionary work of the Carracci family, who helped refine painting and turned it into the Baroque period. Also, I want to mention Santa Maria della Vita. This is a church that holds Niccolò dell'Arca's Lamentation over the Dead Christ. It's 7 life-size terracotta figures unique to the area and frozen in movement at the moment of discovering Christ's death. What makes it extraordinary, and I will tell you, you will remember it, I've been there, is there is sort of a violence in their grief. Mouths are open in screams, bodies are lurching forward, drapery is flying through the air. One woman's cloak billows behind her as she rushes toward the body. In Bologna's otherwise measured religious landscape, this work explodes with raw human emotion. I also want to mention Bologna's Jerusalem. It's the Church of Santo Stefano. One of the most interesting churches in the historic center is the Complesso di Santo Stefano, known as the Seven Churches. It's not a single church. It's a medieval recreation of Jerusalem's holy sites, specifically the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Christ was buried and resurrected. In the early Middle Ages, getting to Jerusalem was dangerous, expensive, and often impossible, just as it is today. So Bologna built its own Jerusalem. Santo Stefano was designed as a pilgrimage route you could walk through without leaving the city. You move through a sequence of interconnected churches and courtyards meant to mirror the passions and death of Christ. The centerpiece is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It's a circular building modeled directly on Jerusalem's Anastasis Rotunda. Inside is a symbolic tomb of Christ under worn stone and dim light. Nearby, the Church of the Holy Crucifix contains a chapel of bandage associated with Christ's burial cloth that we discussed in our Turin episode last Friday. As you walk through, the architecture shifts. Lombard, Romanesque, and early medieval elements layer across the centuries. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the hilltop monastery, San Michele in Bosco. It offers something that the Church of San Luca does not: silence. From the terrace there at San Michele in Bosco, you can see the entire city spread out below. The terracotta roofs, the towers, the perfect geometry of the porticos. You'll understand Bologna's position in the plain and how the Apennines rise behind it. That's why this location is interesting. I also will mention, if you're into contemporary and modern art, the Mambo Museum is your museum in Bologna. Bologna's nickname La Rossa refers not only to its terracotta rooftops, but also to a long and complex political history that has shaped the city's identity into its present. In the 20th century, Bologna became one of the most politically charged cities in Italy. During the fascist era, the color red was inseparable from conflict, resistance, and ideology. Bologna was a stronghold of the anti-fascist sentiment, and during World War II, the city suffered heavy bombing due to its strategic rail and industrial importance. Resistance movements were active here, and the struggle left a deep imprint on local memory. After the fall of fascism at the end of World War II, Bologna emerged as one of the most openly left-wing cities in post-war Italy. It became closely associated with the Italian Communist Party and later the left-leaning civic governments. For decades, Bologna was often cited as a model for what it was called to be a red administration. When people refer to Bologna as La Rossa, they're invoking all of its history at once. The red rooftops, the bloodshed during the war, the resistance of fascism, the post-war embrace of leftist governance. But next, I want to talk about Bologna as the culinary capital of Italy. We signed up for a food tour in Bologna not knowing what to expect. Food tours can be touristy, but this was different. Our guide met us in Piazza Maggiore in the early evening, just as the city was shifting into golden hour, and when work ends and leisure begins. She was Bolognese and very serious about food. In Bologna, she said, we don't just eat, we protect what we eat. We started with an aperitivo, a tradition Bologna claims to have invented in the 1960s. Unlike the elaborate aperitivo spreads you find in Milan today, Bologna's version remains straightforward: a drink, simple accompaniments, and conversation. We stopped at a bar near Via Zamboni, where university students mixed with professors and locals. Our guide ordered us a glass of Pignoletto, a local sparkling wine from the Colli Bolognese hills. Crisp, slightly nutty, nothing showy. The bartender set down small plates without asking. There was fried dough pillows, mortadella sliced thin, chunks of Parmigiano Reggiano, aged 36 months, and a bowl of olives. It's not dinner, our guide said. It's a preparation. Aperitivo opens the stomach. We moved next into the Quadrilatero, the medieval market district just steps from Piazza Maggiore. Here, Bologna's relationship with food became visible, tangible, and serious. The shops weren't styled for Instagram, they're workplaces with wheels of Parmigiano Reggiano, mortadella, fresh pasta. Our guide stopped at a Salameria where the owner greeted us and pointed us to the meat, Bologna's pride. The shopkeeper sliced it fresh, explaining the production process with the precision of a chemist. After our tasting, we headed to a small pasta shop. We stopped to watch two women rolling dough, the sfoline, pasta makers. They worked without speaking, their hands moving in perfect rhythm. Long wooden rolling pins, nearly a meter long, pressed and stretched the dough outward from the center. No machines, no measurements, just muscle memory. Our guide whispered, this skill used to be required before marriage. If you couldn't make pasta, you couldn't run a household. One of the women glanced up and smiled, not stopping her work. She rolled the dough thinner and thinner until we could see the grain of wood on the board beneath it. Then she folded it carefully, cut it into ribbons with a knife, and shook it out to a perfect tagliatelle. For ragu, our guide said. Only tagliatelle for ragu, never spaghetti. At a traditional trattoria, we sat down, and our guide gave us the test. Tagliatelle al ragu. Our plate arrived with golden ribbons of fresh pasta, lightly coated with a rich meat sauce. This is what people outside Italy get wrong. Ragu is not a tomato sauce with meat. It's a meat sauce with some tomato. She explained the technique, the sofrito, which starts with onion, celery, and carrots, cooked slowly in butter until sweet. Ground beef and pork are then added and browned carefully. A splash of white wine, some tomato paste, not fresh tomatoes. Milk added gradually to soften the acidity. Then time, hours for cooking, sometimes a day. The result is unlike any other bolognese you've tasted elsewhere. It's rich but not heavy, complex but not complicated. The pasta was the vehicle, perfect for the sauce. The next course was tortellini and brodo, tiny hand-folded pasta in a clear broth, nothing else. No cream, no sauce, just broth. Our guide had us taste it, and we knew the filling was a precise mixture of pork loin, prosciutto, mortadella, Parmigiano Reggiano, and nutmeg. The pasta is delicate but delicious. Legend claims the shape was inspired by Venus's navel, but our guide dismissed it. Tortellini are about portion, restraint, and technique. Each one must be identical. Cooking just long enough to remain tender without losing structure. With the meal, it was recommended that we try the Sangiovese di Romagna, a red wine from just east of Bologna, structured and earthy, to pair with the food. Later, our guide ordered Lambrusco, a light sparkling red wine that many outsiders dismiss as sweet and simple. Not this, she said, pouring a dry, almost astringent version. Real Lambrusco is serious. It cuts through the fat, it refreshes, it makes you want to keep eating. She was right. As we ate, our guide explained that we were experiencing history made edible. Bologna's role in the food capital is deeply tied to its history as a wealthy agricultural center and university city. The fertile plains of Emilia Romagna, the region of Bologna, produce wheat, eggs, pork, and dairy in abundance. At the same time, the presence of scholars, clergy, and administrators created a culture that valued precision. Food here evolved the same way as law and scholarship did, through structure. By the Middle Ages, Bologna already had a powerful food guild regulating bread, meat, and pasta production. The guilds enforced quality, controlled pricing, and protected techniques. Cooking is craft. By the end of the tour, we understood something essential. Bologna's food culture is rooted in abundance, not extravagance. Meals are generous. Portions are giant, according to me. Flavors are rich and balanced. Back to our tour. I need to mention the sanctuary of the Madonna di San Luca. It overlooks Bologna from the Colle di Guardia, and it's about 3.8 kilometers or just a little over 5 miles out of town. It's got a covered walkway with the 666 arches. The current Baroque sanctuary, designed by Carlo Francesco Dotti and completed in 1757, houses a Byzantine icon of the Madonna and Child believed to have arrived in Bologna around 1160. Legend claims it was painted by St. Luke himself and brought from Constantinople by a Greek. What makes Santa Luca extraordinary isn't the building or icon alone. It's what happens every May, the festival. The story: in the spring of 1433, relentless rain threatened to destroy the year's crops. Week after week, the skies opened, fields flooded, and the harvest looked doomed. The city elders decided to turn to the Madonna of St. Luke. A confraternity climbed the hill in pouring rain, retrieved the icon, and carried it down to the city. When they reached the gates, the rain stopped and the sun appeared. Bologna never forgot. Since 1433, nearly 600 years, the icon has descended from the sanctuary to the Cathedral of St. Peter every year during Ascension Week. It remains in the cathedral for 1 week, then returns to the hilltop in another procession. Only twice has the descent not happened: in 1849 during Austrian occupation and in 1944 because of World War II. This is part of the city's identity. Tens of thousands of Bolognese participate, from clergy, confraternities, community groups, families, students, and the elderly. The entire city is involved. Bells ring continuously, and the route through the streets becomes a river of people. The portico itself was built specifically for this procession. It was constructed between 1674 and 1793 to shelter the faithful from sun and rain as they accompanied the Madonna up and then down the hill. Each arch of the portico was sponsored by a different family or guild, which is why no two are exactly alike. Walking the portico to St. Luca is a climb. It's about 45 minutes to an hour depending on your pace. It's a steady incline. Your legs will feel it, but the rhythm of the arches is meditative, and the hill reveals itself gradually: the towers, the porticos, the cathedral, and then the Apennines behind. For dinner, I'm going to recommend the Trattoria di Via Sera. Our guide actually recommended this to us. It's on Via Luigi Sera. It's about a 15-minute walk from Piazza Maggiore. The dining room is warm and unpretentious with wooden tables. It feels like you got invited to someone's home. We ordered a variety of dishes, including the tagliatelle and tortellini and some roasted meats. The staff were kind, and I highly recommend it. If it's a little bit too far, then I'm going to recommend the Osteria Brockendosso. It's a 10-minute walk from Piazza Maggiore, and it's on a narrow street lined with porticos in the University District. The food is traditional Bolognese, and the staff is quick to take care of you. It's not fancy, but you'll leave satisfied. I want to also mention another festival, which is Bologna Jazz Fest. It's Bologna's oldest jazz tradition, founded in 1958. The story begins with two men: Alberto Alberti, who opened Italy's first shop dedicated to imported jazz records, and Antonio Foresti, a jazz manager with serious ambitions. Together, they put together the first Festival of Jazz Emiliano in 1958. The concert was so successful that the following year they brought Chet Baker to Bologna. By 1960, the festival had become the Festa Internazionale di Jazz, and Bologna's palaces and theaters became stages for the greatest names in jazz history. Between 1959 and 1976, Bologna hosted an extraordinary parade of talent, from Charles Mingus to Dexter Gordon, Bill Evans, Miles Davis, Duke Ellington, Sarah Vaughan, B.B. King, Ray Charles, Keith Jarrett, and Dizzy Gillespie all performed here. The festival became a European landmark. Then it stopped. In 1976, after 16 groundbreaking years, the festival couldn't continue due to political turbulence, but in 2006 it was revived. And today, Bologna Jazz Fest runs for nearly 6 weeks every autumn, typically from October to mid-November, with over 80 concerts featuring international artists alongside Italian talent. This is the Autumn Jazz event. Okay, let's talk transportation. One of Bologna's greatest strengths is that it's a base for transportation. Bologna Centrale is one of the country's most important railway hubs. Trains radiate out from here in every direction. You've got high-speed trains called the Frecciarossa or Italo trains that connect to Florence in 35 minutes, Milan in an hour, Venice in an hour and a half, and Rome in 2 hours. This makes Bologna an ideal hub for travelers who want to cover serious ground without constantly changing hotels. In addition to high-speed routes, Bologna's regional rail connects to many nearby destinations. Cities like Modena, Parma, Imola, and Ravenna are between 20 and 60 minutes away by regional train. And we did use these regional trains to get around and stayed in Bologna for a long time doing this exact thing. Bologna also has a regional airport that offers flights around Italy and Europe. And you can use the Marconi Express monorail that connects the airport to Bologna Centrale in about 7 minutes. As far as day trips from Bologna, we went first to Modena, which of course is known for its balsamic. Modena has ancient roots, first settled by the Etruscans and later developed by Roman rule. After the fall of Rome, Modena passed through Lombard and Carolingian hands before rising to prominence in the Middle Ages. The city's redefining era began in 1598 when the powerful House of Este moved its capital from Ferrara, my hometown, to Modena. For over 2 centuries, Modena became a refined ducal court known for patronage of the arts, music, architecture, and gastronomy. Unlike imperial capitals, Modena's power was controlled, cultured, and local. The Este family shaped the city that valued craftsmanship over spectacle. In Modena, you're going to want to see the Modena Cathedral. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the finest Romanesque churches in Europe. Its sculpted facade and interior reliefs speak to the medieval faith and artistic confidence. Nearby in Piazza Grande, you'll find the Ducal Palace of Modena. Beyond history, Modena is synonymous with innovation. It's the birthplace of Ferrari and home to the Ferrari Museum, connecting Modena's technical genius to its modern identity. And then there's the balsamic vinegar. Traditional balsamic is not a condiment here, it's a heritage. Aging takes decades, often in family attics, passed from one generation to the next. We've got one major festival in Modena, and that is the Balsamic Festival. It's the Festa del Balsamico Tradizionale. It includes tasting, events, showcases, and it invites visitors to understand why balsamic is so important to Modena. Modena is about 30 minutes from Bologna by train. It's a super easy route. Another place we visited was Parma. Parma has Roman origins, but flourished mostly during the Renaissance and Enlightenment. The city passed through the hands of powerful families, including the Farnese, the Bourbon-Parma dynasty, which transformed Parma into a cultured court with strong ties to France. Parma became known for its diplomacy, refinement, and balance. Power here was expressed through music, education, and food. Parma's historic center is graceful and orderly, and I highly recommend that you get to the Parma Cathedral and the baptistry. They are absolutely fantastic. Music lovers feel the presence of Giuseppe Verdi, whose legacy permeates the city. The Teatro Regio di Parma is one of Italy's most revered opera theaters, where audiences are famously discerning. Culinary Parma is famous for the Parmigiano Reggiano and Prosciutto di Parma. Each autumn, Parma honors its most famous son with the Verdi Festival. Performances, concerts, lectures fill the city. The festival reflects Parma, elegant, serious, and deeply emotional. Parma is about 1 hour from Bologna by train and pairs beautifully with Modena because it's on the same route. The other direction is Imola. Imola began as a Roman settlement, and it's positioned on the Via Emilia. In the Middle Ages, Imola became a strategic stronghold, contested by powerful families including the Manfredi and later absorbed into the Papal States. Unlike Parma or Modena, Imola developed a more defensive, pragmatic character. Its identity was shaped by fortification, resilience, and geography. The symbol of Imola is the Rocca Sforzesca Imola. This is a massive fortress that dominates the historic center. Inside, you can trace centuries of military strategy and civic survival. Imola's oldest town remains are walkable and authentic, with Roman remnants, medieval streets, and a strong local feel. Imola is globally known for speed. The Autodromo Enzo Edino Ferrari places the city firmly on the world stage for motorsport. The Emilia Romagna Grand Prix brings international energy to the city each spring. While the race draws global attention, local experience is a point of pride. Imola is only 20 minutes from Bologna by train, making it a super easy day trip. Okay, if you're watching this on YouTube, I had to take my purple sweater off. I was way too hot, so now I'm in a t-shirt. You haven't gone crazy. I did change clothes in the middle of an episode. Okay, next, we're going to talk about Ravenna, which is absolutely incredible. It's one of my favorite cities in all of Italy. It's condensed, but it has some of the most extraordinary sites in European history. In the 5th century AD, Ravenna became the capital of the Western Roman Empire, what was left of the Roman Empire, later serving as the seat of the Ostrogothic kingdom and the Byzantine Exarchate. This layered rule made Ravenna a bridge between the East and the West, where Roman governance, Christian faith, and Byzantine artistry merged. Ravenna's legacy is preserved in its mosaics, among the finest in the world. Sites such as the Basilica of San Vitale and the Mausoleum of Galla Placidia are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Absolutely incredible. Love Ravenna. The mosaics shimmer with gold and color, offering an artistic experience unlike anywhere else in Italy. And if you go to Ravenna, I recommend you head to the mosaic workshops and take a class. It is really fun. Ravenna is also the final resting place of Dante Alighieri, adding literary gravity to its cultural depth. Each summer, the Ravenna Festival brings opera, classical music, and contemporary performances into historical spaces. The contrast between ancient mosaics and live performance is unforgettable. Ravenna is about 1 hour from Bologna by train and offers a completely different emotional experience. I have a mosaic from Ravenna right here on my shelf. It's one of the pieces of the ceiling of the Mausoleum of Galla Placidia. It's a copy made by the mosaicists. Absolutely beautiful place. So, to wrap up our Bologna episode, Bologna doesn't overwhelm you with royalty or monuments, but it is beautifully laid out under the porticos. It's a great place to have a delightful breakfast, tortellini and brodo for lunch, and some bolognese for dinner. The city believes in community and education, and it doesn't ask for your attention. It earns your respect. If you enjoyed this episode, there's an associated blog post on my website, KaterinaFerrara.com, with additional details, photos, and practical information to help you plan your Bologna trip. If you have questions about this episode or suggestions for future destinations you'd like me to cover, I'd love to hear from you. Email me at Katerina@KaterinaFerrara.com or use my contact link on my website. Thank you for spending time with me today. Until next time, keep traveling.